In Canada, hockey is a sport that impacts many people. This can be through something as simple as cheering on your favorite team to playing the game yourself. Usually the first thing that people think of when they think of this sport is the sound of skates hitting the ice or the defenseman screaming at his partner to drop back in order to avoid the big play. While this is a big rush for many players, it doesn't always come in this form.
This is Cardell Place, a recreation center in northeast Calgary. This is the Blue Gym in Cardell. Every Saturday, without fail, rain or shine, setup begins. 2 back-to-back hockey games between 4 teams of hockey players take place. They are competing for the chance to have league supremacy in what is known as the Calgary Power Hockey League, or more affectionately, the CPHL.
The CPHL is a competitive wheelchair hockey league for people with various disabilities who require the use of a power wheelchair. It began in the early 1980s at Dr. Gordon Townsend High School. A group of people that were attending at the time were extremely interested in hockey. This interest grew rather rapidly, and in 1983, the small group of players began recruiting others and formed 4 teams that would play on a weekly basis. This is Kevin Phillips, who was one of the players to be recruited and joined the league in 1988. He recounts some of his early experiences from then to now.
It was a much smaller place, and the floors were different. The whole atmosphere was different because it was a hospital, or the school part of the hospital. Positives of playing in the children's hospital would most likely, I would think, be the fact that it was such a smaller area to play in. It was a lot easier to go back and forth without really killing your motors.
Since 1988, the CPHL has grown in popularity throughout Calgary, and as a result has gone from the small group from which it began to a pool of 40-plus players, ranging in age from as young as 12 to as old as their 50s. The first thing that you will undoubtedly notice about these players is that while they aren't on ice, it's a gym floor, and they're rolling the lines just as any other team would. And while they are not putting the biscuit in the basket in the form of a black disc, they use this wiffle ball to make sure the highlight reel is still racked up and ready to go. This is Nathan Grosskloss. He has accumulated almost 700 career points in the sport and believes that chair positioning is just as important in wheelchair hockey as being a smooth skater is on the ice.
The biggest difference and the biggest similarities ends up being that you have to end up realizing that the chair is obviously bigger than someone's leg when they're skating on the ice, or just the body itself taking up more room to be able to block. So positioning becomes a little bit more of a similarity when you want to still get the idea of being able to block the puck or the ball from being able to go by. But in this example, it's more so your chair is so much bigger, so you can take a little bit more advantage of how you position, your timing on it. Do you want the back wheel, front wheel to be in the way? And that's how it ends up kind of translating to a similarity, but you know, with a little bit different kind of scope, obviously.
Obviously, this is easier said than done when driving a wheelchair with many small details. When to turn right, go forward, or back. What's the easiest way to start when playing the game?
The best way to learn about chair positioning is, are you getting caught whenever someone's doing, let's say, a deke move, if they're spinning around? Are you following? Are you putting yourself closer to the angles to be able to cut them off towards the net? And if not, then obviously you need to be able to readjust what you're doing. If it's turning left or right, to be able to, you know, you don't always have to follow the spin rotation that they end up doing to try to be able to cut them off. You cut down the angles before going towards the net instead of having to worry about trying to make sure that you're going to bump them or anything like that, and then gravitating a little bit more towards just knowing your chair as well and how quick they are and how quick you are too, and taking advantage of that.
The final major difference in the structure of the sport is the implementation of a leveling system. When a player enters the sport for the first time, they are categorized as either a level 3, 2, or 1. Nathan goes into more depth on the subject.
Level 3 within the hockey league itself is stick attached players only. This tends to be defensemen or goaltenders. That's their primary use, and they can vary in range and skill level as well. Level 2 example is my case. So in this case, you have the strength ranging from close to normal adult all the way down to someone that can just hang on to the stick. Level 1 is someone that's the strength of a normal adult or stronger and has the range and mobility to be able to do anything that a normal person would do, but just may not be able to use their legs, for instance, to be able to play in this league.
Obviously, each level in the system brings something different to the game. Here are some of the built-in positives at each level.
The greatest assets that a level 3 bring is, one, they learn the strongest skills towards positioning of the chair, because that's what they need to do. They don't have a stick to swing from their arm, so they know how to balance the idea of being able to block the shot, get in the way. Level 2 player, the assets that they tend to bring, they tend to be the more passers, they can score and everything, but not predominantly in the toughest areas, where they end up having both chair positioning being a key part of their play, but also being able to be sneaky enough with their arms to be able to do certain maneuvers, shots, depending on what their strengths are. Level 1 example, they tend to forget about the chair. They have the arm. They can shoot from anywhere. They can shoot from behind the net, wrap it around, backhand, forehand, doesn't really matter how it is. They'll be able to fire it from over half court half the time and still be able to pick the top corners.
This is Sean Paul. He has played in the CPHL for 3 years and recently broke the single-season record for most goals in the season with 119 in 15 games. Sean is classified as a level 1 within the context of the sport, but in his short time he says that there are definitely some adjustments that he has had to make in order to keep himself safe as well as others.
Challenge for learning how to control my boundaries, stopping distances, acceleration, other players determining how fast and their abilities and learning their limitations, just to avoid accidents and injury.
While Sean took some time to understand the game, he realizes there's a big difference between playing against another level 1 as opposed to other levels, and it is be aggressive or get beat.
The biggest difference is aggression, I guess. A lot more aggressive game, a lot more, just a lot more competitive,
Just like in ice hockey, power hockey players have tendencies, but no two players are the same, and you need to adjust based on the strengths and weaknesses of the individual as well as their disability.
The different adjustment is depending on what their strengths and weaknesses are. If someone doesn't have a backhand, then to always cover the forehand side on them. And taking advantage of those things are the biggest key towards this game. If someone's spastic, they're going to shoot and you're going to be able to see their body completely tense up similar to mine does in a certain way and be able to read when they're going to shoot. Or if they're going to try to do something a little bit more fancy and fluid, then you'll read their arms and how they're sticking it out further, almost kind of baiting you to try to come in towards them.
Bearing this in mind, Nathan discusses the differences in how he plays against a level 1 as opposed to a level 2.
When going up against a level 2, I know I can use my arm strength to at least be similar or equal quality to be able to take them on. But against a level 1, Sean Paul, for instance, as an example, you want to predominantly care more about your chair, because they're going to be able to outbeat you arm strength anyway, so why give yourself the chance and the threat of them being able to break away on you in comparison?
This is Joe Pack. Joe was one of the volunteer coaches in the CPHL and has been for 2 years. Joe has a deep understanding of the level system as he was a referee for a number of years before becoming a coach, and he believes that it helped give him a better understanding of how to push players to their limits.
Yeah, more and more games that you officiate, the more exposure year after year, you see these players develop and evolve into, stronger players. It's just, I guess, an exposure and experience type level. Knowing that in the coaching realm now, where for the past couple of years to see the capabilities and the strengths of these players, yeah, I can totally leverage that. I know what they're capable of, I know what they're not capable of, and I know where they could excel.
Joe is also a firm believer that the level 3 players, when on their game, are capable of doing things with their chairs that essentially make them moving walls.
The advantage of a strong level 3, again, is positioning and speed of a chair, hockey sense, understanding of positional play and defensive play. They're like moving walls.
Joe has reffed in both ice hockey and power hockey, and he says that the transition between the two versions of the game is not easy.
The understanding of infractions in power hockey, it's different. You have to treat the chair as a part of them, and their personal space around them has to be a consideration when it comes to movement and infractions and calling penalties, because it's the same game, but the infractions and how people manipulate the chairs and their own space with other players, it's a little different.
As much as these players are here to compete on a weekly basis and think about everything that has been highlighted, every game there is one thing that can never be lost about who they are, and that is family. Every person in this league donates their time on a weekly basis to make sure that all these athletes can partake in the game that they love so much, purely out of the kindness in their hearts. This is Jacob McGregor, and he says that the impact that all these amazing people have on this league is something that can't be forgotten.
Without the volunteers, we don't play. We don't have coaches, we don't have scorekeepers, anything.
One of the best points about these volunteers is that some of them are parents, and in Jacob's opinion, it adds to the relationship that he and his father have, since they get to compete alongside each other, with his father doubling as his coach.
I love having my dad be my coach. It gives us something to bond over every week, even though Dad pushes me really hard, actually. He doesn't let me get away with a lot of stuff, but I like it that way.
The next time that you settle yourself into the stands to watch a hockey game, remember this. Every sport has its pros and cons, its ups and downs, and everyone wants to win. There's intricacies in every game and battles along the way, but when all is said and done, everyone that plays within this sport and this league are like family, and win, lose, or draw, that never goes away.